Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today for the virtual side event on Safeguarding Sport from Corruption, which has been organised by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime in the margins of the United Nations General Assembly Against Corruption. My name is Ronan O'Leary, and I'm a Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice Officer at UNODC, and I also have the pleasure of leading UNODC's programme on Safeguarding Sport from Corruption and Crime. I also have the honour of moderating today's side event. Ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations General Assembly, which will convene today in about an hour, will adopt a high-level political declaration on how to tackle corruption. While we cannot and we will not prejudge the prerogative of the General Assembly, the draft text of the declaration recognises the importance of tackling corruption in sport and the need to enhance cooperation to do so. In this international, normative and political architecture, today's special event on safeguarding sport from corruption is an important stepping stone. The overall aim of the side event is to raise awareness about the threats posed by corruption to sport, but also it's an opportunity to discuss and introduce future-orientated and innovative initiatives to address those very risks. The side event will consist of a number of high-level interventions. We will have Ms. Ghada Waly, the Executive Director of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Mr. Vincent Van Quickbourne, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Justice and of the North Sea of Belgium, Mr. Timothy Dunham, the Deputy Assistant Director of the Criminal Investigative Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation of the United States of America. We will have Mr. Thomas Bach, the President of the International Olympic Committee, speak, as well as Mr. Gianni Infantino, the President of the Fédération Internationale de Football Association. Before we begin, I'd like to inform our speakers and participants that the meeting will be recorded and subsequently will be made available on UNODC's website. I'd also ask you to kindly not use the chat function for any personal messages, and please note that due to time constraints, we will not be able to have questions at the end of the event. With that, I now have the pleasure of inviting Ms. Ghada Waly, the Executive Director of UNODC, to deliver her opening remarks. Ms. Waly, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ronan. Distinguished Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us at this event on safeguarding sports, organized in the margins of the very first UN General Assembly special session against corruption. I'm grateful to Belgium, the United States, and to our partners at FIFA and the IOC for joining UNODC for our discussion on tackling corruption and crime in sports. The global sports industry, valued at $756 billion annually, has suffered in the pandemic at all levels. The cancellation and postponement of professional sporting events has affected entire sports ecosystems and put millions of livelihoods on the line, impacting not only those working in the sports industry, but also those in related retail and services jobs. Lockdowns and restrictions on activities have disrupted youth sports around the world, with a negative impact on health and deprived young people of important outlets for their social and mental well-being. The empowerment of women and girls through sports has also taken a step backward during this time, as outlined in a report of the UN Secretary General and by UN Women. Confinement periods and the global recession have compromised the survival of women's teams and leagues, while many girls will be unable to return to sports practice even after COVID measures are lifted. As countries acknowledged in a General Assembly resolution last December, sports are an enabler of sustainable development, and they have an essential role to play in building forward from the pandemic towards healthy, inclusive, and resilient societies. The comprehensive political declaration to be adopted by UNGASS today includes a strong commitment by member states to join forces in protecting sports from wrongdoing, including within the framework of the UN, and to adopt a multi-stakeholder approach to inspire us and contribute to our shared prosperity, sports need to offer a level playing field and be free from corruption and crime. The UNGASS political declaration highlights the need for cooperation between sports organizations, international and regional organizations, as well as law enforcement authorities, and underscores the value of awareness raising, expertise exchange, and best practice sharing. UNODC has been promoting such cooperation through its program on safeguarding sport from corruption and crime. I am grateful to the European Union, Norway, the Russian Federation, and the IOC for their support of the program. Since 2018, our program has brought together representatives from law enforcement agencies, criminal justice and anti-corruption authorities, as well as sports organizations from more than 130 countries to address threats to sports. Our office helps foster a culture of integrity by assisting member states and sports organizations in building their capacities to tackle corruption and crimes in sports. We have seen a strong increase in the number of specific laws adopted to tackle corruption in sports, from 25 laws identified in 2016 to 42 laws in 2021. And we are supporting governments in developing effective laws in this area. By organizing training workshops and promoting the exchange of information, we have also assisted more than 7,500 officials from criminal justice authorities, law enforcement, and sports organizations in their efforts to prevent, detect, and investigate wrongdoing in sports. Using our knowledge and global expertise, we have recently had the privilege of supporting the Italian presidency of the G20 to develop draft high-level principles on tackling corruption in sport, which are currently under negotiations. Partnering with national, regional, and international sports bodies is key to the success of our work. As part of our collaboration with IOC, we are jointly co-chairing a new task force of the International Partnership Against Corruption in Sport, aiming to assess and strengthen cooperation between law enforcement and criminal justice authorities and sports organizations. We also very much value our excellent partnership with FIFA, strengthened under a new agreement signed last year. The FIFA Global Integrity Program, which is delivered in collaboration with UNODC, will provide all 211 FIFA member associations with the knowledge and tools to fight match fixing at the local level. Looking ahead, we see many opportunities for UNODC to strengthen its contributions to safeguarding sports, drawing upon its role as a connector, convener, and expertise provider. We are excited to leverage the potential of the new UNODC Globe Network of anti-corruption law enforcement authorities, which we are launching tomorrow, with the investigation of cases involving corruption in sports. Police and justice cooperation as part of the Globe Network can strengthen information sharing to help disrupt illegal betting and manipulation of sports competitions, as well as money laundering and fraud in the context of major sports events and player transfers. We will also continue working with IOC to develop the capacities of criminal justice authorities and sports organizations to address corruption in sport through training activities. We are jointly developing 2 guides to be published at the end of this year to support investigators, legislators, parliamentarians, policymakers, and justice professionals in tackling the manipulation of sports competitions. In December this year, we plan to launch the first ever UNODC Global Report on safeguarding sport from corruption at the 9th session of the Conference of the State Parties to the UN Convention Against Corruption in Sharm el-Sheikh. The report will map the types of threats facing sports and present recommendations for addressing them, backed by examples of successful strategies implemented around the world, which will help member states assess and enhance their own measures. Ladies and gentlemen, in this landmark year for anti-corruption action, the Sharm el-Sheikh Conference will take forward the UNGASS political declaration, including its focus on safeguarding sports. Together, we can keep sports integrity at the top of the international agenda so the world can harness the power of sport to heal our societies and bring us joy, helping us to emerge stronger from the crisis and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much. Ronan?
Thank you very much, Ms. Waly. I would now like to invite our next distinguished speaker, His Excellency, Mr. Vincent Van Quickbourne, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Justice and of the North Sea of Belgium, to take the floor. Mr. Van Quickenborne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mrs. Executive Director of UNODC, Mr. President of the IOC, President of the FIFA, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me first of all thank the organizers of this event for inviting me to participate. As in fact, Belgium's efforts to fight corruption in sport haven't gone unnoticed at the international level. And as a Minister of Justice and a sports lover myself, I can only be pleased with that. I would also like to extend my gratitude to the people on the ground who are working hard every day to combat corruption in sport and in other areas in Belgium and across the world. Those people are the backbone upon which all our actions rely. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, corruption is a global phenomenon. No country is completely spared, nor any sector of society. Whenever money and prestige are involved, malicious people will try to break the rules for their own advantage. Our duty is to minimize the opportunity for corruption and maximize the chances of getting caught and prosecuted. Sport has a tremendous social and economic impact on our societies that we know. That's why it's so important to preserve its integrity and shield it from corruption, from cheating. There are few human activities that convey as much positive values as sport. Readiness for personal effort, team spirit, respect for the opponent, you name it. And even when practiced at a modest level, it has a remarkable educational value for our youngsters, on and off the pitch. And although professional sport has become a lucrative business, it must remain true to these core values on every level. Kids across the world look up to sports stars as their role models. They need to be exemplary, but it would also be unfair to single them out. It's the whole chain of sport that needs to uphold high ethical standards. And that includes us, public authorities, sports federations, clubs, referees, managers, private companies, and so on. It is by working together in close collaboration that we will reach this goal. When we talk about corruption in sport, the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, match fixing. Corruption, however, can manifest itself in many different ways. A distinction is often made between match fixing and management corruption. The latter does not necessarily affect the result of the game, but rather aims at obtaining a financial benefit, sport licenses, TV rights, the organization of tournaments, and others. In Belgium, corruption in sport became a matter of public record since 2005 in particular, following a match-fixing scandal in our first soccer division. Match-fixing, of course, does not only affect football. Other disciplines have also been hit, like tennis, for example. A recent study of the University of Ghent in Belgium conveyed among more than 600 members of the Flemish football, tennis and badminton federations highlights surprising figures regarding match fixing. First of all, 6% of the respondents indicated that they had personally approached to manipulate a match, and 16% that they knew someone who had been approached to that end. Simply to stress that the problem may be more acute than what one might think, even though not everyone responds favorably to these advances, obviously. It does not always involve huge amounts of money either. Another interesting figure in this survey is that only 10% of match-fixing attempts are directly related to betting. In more than 70% of the cases, avoiding relegation is the main motive. Without going into the specifics of ongoing investigations, I also want to stress that beyond match fixing, management corruption is also being scrutinized by our judicial system. Our Federal Public Prosecutor's Office, together with an investigating judge, is leading at the moment a comprehensive inquiry towards alleged match-fixing operations and money laundering in Belgian football at the highest level. This investigation covers players, trainers and managers, but also referees and brokers. And we must and we will wait for the outcome of the ongoing legal proceedings in Belgium before drawing conclusions. But this case is again a new wake-up call. I'm sure that Belgium is not an exception. Other countries have been confronted with similar cases, and some of them even made the headlines. There's another finding that is clear from our investigations. Corruption often goes hand in hand with other forms of criminality, such as money laundering, fraud, blackmail, extortion, and/or exploitation. Each situation must be looked at and dealt with as a whole. I firmly believe that tackling corruption in sports is first and foremost a matter of political will, from political decision makers, of course, but also from the sports sector itself. We are in this together, and that's what makes today's event even more relevant. The political declaration adopted at the 2021 UNGASS gives us a mandate, a broad mandate to confront corruption in sport, and that in all its aspects. It's a joint undertaking where every contribution will count. So several sports federation clubs have already rolled up their sleeves by conducting awareness-raising campaigns, adopting ethical charters, or establishing monitoring and sanctions schemes. A recent example is the International Tennis Integrity Agency, which has been set up this year as an independent body to promote and enhance the integrity of tennis worldwide. This shows that there is growing attention for ethics in sport. A smooth collaboration and information flow between the judiciary and the sports sector is also paramount. Belgium has signed the Convention on the Manipulation of Sports Competition of the Council of Europe, the so-called Macolin Convention. We did not wait for the finalization of the ratification process to implement some of its principles. Belgium was one of the first countries in the world to establish a national match-fixing platform, and that was in 2016. It includes all the relevant public authorities, sport ministries, the police, the public prosecutor's office, the gaming commission, the national lottery, and the main national sports federations. And it allows us to develop a comprehensive response to match fixing and all other forms of manipulation in sport, including through prevention. The Belgian National Platform, together with the federal police, has created a single hotline and webpage where suspected cases of manipulation of sporting events can be reported. Anyone who finds facts that suggest that a match has been or will be rigged can report it through this channel, and of course anonymity is guaranteed. To foster information exchange at the international level, the Belgian National Platform has been actively involved in the Group of Copenhagen, the Council of Europe's network of national platforms, which has already connects at this moment 33 national coordinators. Since 2018, Belgian criminal law recognized the status of repentant, whereby a person accused, prosecuted, or convicted for a serious crime can decide to collaborate with the justice system in exchange for a reduced sentence. There are strict legal conditions, but it has proven to be truly helpful in combating corruption in sport. Moreover, the first defendant to benefit from this new repentant status is involved in the federal prosecutor's inquiry I referred to earlier. A sports fraud team has also been created within our judicial police. Ladies and gentlemen, the rules on the pitch are clear, enforced by a referee, and fouls are punished. The rules outside the pitch shouldn't be any different. We have lots of tools at our disposal to effectively fight corruption in sports. So let's do this all together. Finally, the misdeeds of a few, however, should not reflect on the many. Today we are debating about corruption in sport, a serious problem which should not be downplayed, but also not exaggerated. Most competitions and most competitors are totally fair play. In a couple of days, we will be kicking off a summer full of major sporting events, including the European Football Championship and the Olympic Games. And after so many months, and more than a year of restrictions of all kinds, it will be a celebration of joy that sports bring to the world. It might be different than usual, but we will still watch it with the same enthusiasm. We, and I myself, we are very looking forward to a sports summer in 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Quickenborne, for those very, very interesting remarks. And it's a pleasure to count on Belgium's support. We've had excellent cooperation with your colleagues, your experts in the course of developing our program here at UNODC. So thank you once again for your intervention. With that, I would now like to kindly invite our next distinguished speaker, Mr. Timothy Dunham. Mr. Dunham is the Deputy Assistant Director of the Criminal Investigative Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation of the United States of America. Mr. Dunham, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. As we all know, corruption in the sport industry is a widespread issue that threatens the integrity of sport as an institution. Corruption in sport ranges from doping and match fixing to money laundering and bribery, and sport is a symbol of national identity. The FBI understands that corruption in sport not only undermines the legitimacy of individual players and teams, but also has the ability to weaken these symbols of national identity. The FBI's Integrity in Sport and Gaming program was developed to combat threats of influence from organized crime groups and other criminal actors who seek to undermine integrity in sport. The ISG program has two interrelated components: ensuring integrity in sport and tackling illegal sports gambling. As such, the focus of our ISG program is to first promote partnerships with public and private entities involved in sports integrity, increase education and information sharing amongst those entities and within the law enforcement community, and also support case development to address these growing threats to sport and gaming. Our ISG program is housed within the FBI's Transnational Organized Crime Global section. The ISG investigates corruption in sport, but as mentioned, also focuses on illegal sports gambling. The United States is in a unique position in that since overturning the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act in 2018, individual states are now permitted to legalize sports gambling. Currently, 21 states plus Washington, D.C. have legalized sports betting in some capacity. There are nuances to each state's legislation, and these nuances can lead to confusion amongst bettors and law enforcement that criminals are able to exploit for monetary gain. The FBI's Integrity in Sport and Gaming program focuses resources on the following types of investigations. First, illegal gambling operations. The sporting markets affected are truly transnational, and some are run by organized crime syndicates. We've found that criminal organizations typically use illegal gambling as a means to fund other illegal activities. As gambling becomes legal across the states and mainstream here in the general public, criminals are seemingly more comfortable running illegal gambling businesses. In addition to the illegal gambling statutes, gambling and sports integrity are interrelated, and groups have manipulated sporting events in a number of ways, ranging from kickbacks on television rights to bribery payments to referees, coaches, or players for inside information that could be used for betting purposes. The FBI's ISG is working on increasing awareness to amateur, collegiate, and professional athletes of the real risk of falling victim to organized crime groups manipulating their positions for monetary gain. A growing trend that the FBI is seeing not only in the world of sports, but in other areas as well, is an increase in threats to individuals via social media. Ease of which to seemingly hide one's identity and threaten or harass another individual via the internet has only grown over the years. The FBI wants to make it known that we are allocating resources to investigating and prosecuting these types of crimes. Sporting competitions are also corrupted via the use of prohibited substances. The Rodchenkov Anti-Doping Act was passed in December of 2020 in order to prosecute organizations and individuals involved in doping to gain an advantage in competition. The FBI wants to stress that this act is primarily focused on institutions or organizations that corrupt sport through the use of prohibited substances, not on individual athletes. Criminal groups perpetrating sports manipulation and illegal gambling operations prey on players and sporting organizations. Extortion, racketeering, and threats of violence are coercion mechanisms often used in furtherance of their illegal activity. Sporting institutions represent symbols for the American public and for the publics of our international partners, and every effort should be made to preserve those symbols against corrosive organized criminal elements. The FBI will continue to work alongside international and local partners in law enforcement, regulatory agencies, monitoring services, and individual sport integrity units in the fight against corruption in sport. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dunham, for your remarks. Again, very, very interesting to hear about the work that's being done by the US, in particular that international dimension that the Sports Integrity Group is bringing to the fight against corruption in sport. And for us, it remains a privilege to work with the FBI on this important topic. So thank you once again for your remarks, Mr. Dunham.
Thank you.
Now, we have the pleasure of the International Olympic Committee taking part in this side event. And we have a pre-recorded message by Mr. Thomas Bach, the president of the International Olympic Committee, and we will play it. However, I would first like to give the floor to Ms. Paquerette Girard-Zappelli, who is the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer of the International Olympic Committee and is here to represent Mr. Bach. Ms. Girard-Zappelli, Paquerette, if I may, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, Your Excellencies and participants to this very important meeting. I will not add anything to the message which will be delivered in a second by the IOC President, just to thank again the UNODC for the organization of this very important meeting today. I remain and will remain at your disposal if there is any further question after the speech of the IOC President. Thank you for your understanding and your attention during this message. Ronan?
The Executive Director of the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime, Mrs. Ghada Waly, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates and participants. Last December, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution which highlighted sport as a global accelerator of peace and sustainable development. This resolution was adopted by consensus of all 193 UN member states, demonstrating the unanimous acknowledgement by the international community of the relevance of sport in society today. The resolution also welcomes with appreciation all upcoming Olympic and Paralympic Games as a way to promote peace and development. The power of the Olympic Games is their universality. They are the only event that brings the entire world together in peaceful competition. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, if there is a true symbol of peace in our world, it is the Olympic spirit. This is our message to all humankind. Our ability to send this message rests on our credibility and integrity. This is why, as the leader of the Olympic movement, the IOC continues to strengthen its good governance and calls upon the Olympic movement sports organizations to follow this lead. For these reasons, we are proud that we have implemented all good governance measures called for under our reform program Olympic Agenda 2020 that concluded last year. We have put in place a robust system of governance and transparency. Our accounts are audited at a much higher standard than legally required. We publish an annual report, making all our flows of money fully transparent. We have an organizational excellence program to ensure best-in-class operations. We strengthened the independence of the IOC Ethics Commission, which is chaired by the 8th UN Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. In a clear break with the past, we have also revolutionized our approach for selecting hosts of Olympic Games. One of the major reasons for this reform was to counter the risk for corruption that the former bidding process held. Taken together, with all these our reforms, the rules and tools are now in place to prevent misconduct and to swiftly sanction such misbehavior. We continue to have credibility and integrity as a central feature of our new strategic roadmap, Olympic Agenda 2020+5. We know that the fight against corruption is always an ongoing effort. This is always work in progress, because we know, and we all know, that rules and systems alone do not make us immune. No organization in this world is immune in this regard. While of course our own efforts are essential, they are, however, not enough to efficiently tackle corruption. We know we cannot win this fight against criminal activities on our own. We need your support. We need the support of governments, of the United Nations, and of the relevant intergovernmental organizations. In this context, our cooperation with UNODC is key. Therefore, I would like to thank UNODC Executive Director Mrs. Ghada Waly for her leadership, support, and cooperation. It is only through such partnerships that we can effectively tackle criminal activities like corruption, which affects, unfortunately, all areas of society, including business, politics, and sport. For this reason, together with UNODC, the IOC launched the International Partnership Against Corruption in Sport. IPEX brings together all actors with a stake in fighting corruption in sport. Governments, law enforcement authorities, intergovernmental organizations like OECD and the Council of Europe, many others, and of course, sport organizations. This multi-stakeholder approach is so important because only by cooperating, we can leverage the expertise and authority of each partner while respecting each other's areas of responsibility. To do so requires mutual trust and respect from all partners, which is the core strength of IPEX. Through IPEX, sport organizations can cooperate with the governments and law enforcement authorities, investigating criminal activity in the very specific environment of sport. With IPEX, we have built a strong foundation and effective framework to tackle corruption in sport. This is why I invite even more governments to join IPEX, because only if we stand united, we can win the fight against corruption. In this respect, we are very grateful for the UNODC resolution on safeguarding sport from corruption. We appreciate this important step because it supports our efforts to ensure the credibility and integrity of sport. We can only promote this role of sport as an accelerator for peace and sustainable development, highlighted by the UN General Assembly, in partnership with others. This is why I would like to say thank you. Thank you to UNODC and all our IPEX partners for demonstrating in such a great way that whether in sport or in the many other challenges in life, we're always stronger together. In this Olympic spirit, I wish you fruitful discussions and a most successful session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paqueret, and for your kind words, and also for all the cooperation that you and your team and the IOC in general have provided to UNODC and to our friends and colleagues in sports organisations and governments that we're working with. I think, as Mr. Bach has conveyed, there's nobody is immune, and certainly there is a lot more that needs to be done. And I think we're very glad to have you as a partner to continue in that journey. I would also kindly ask you to please convey our thanks to Mr. Bach for preparing that message. It is very much appreciated. So with that, thank you once again, Paqueret. So now we'll move to the final intervention, and Mr. Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, has also prepared a pre-recorded message that we will play shortly. But before doing so, I'd like to give the floor to Miriam Burkhardt, the head of global public affairs of FIFA. Miriam, a pleasure to see you, to have you on board, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ronan. Much appreciated. Dear UN member state representatives, dear UNODC Executive Director, Ms. Waly, dear Excellencies and distinguished delegates, on behalf of the FIFA President, I would like to express our appreciation for the invitation to this special session on safeguarding sport from corruption and transmit his heartfelt best wishes. Football as a team sport with immense worldwide popularity has an important social role and can serve as an enabler of sustainable development. Football is so much more than a game. It has a unique potential to promote values of fair play, inclusion, teamwork and tolerance, as well as to help achieve public policy objectives ranging from enhancing healthy lifestyles, promoting education and life skills, to youth development, anti-discrimination, gender equality, as well as crime and conflict prevention. In light of the challenges caused by the coronavirus pandemic, now it is more important than ever to realize the full potential of football. And integrity is a key prerequisite for sport to fulfill its important social role. As the President will shed light on in more detail, there are many corruption-related threats to the integrity of the beautiful game, and FIFA has launched several initiatives and entered into global alliances with the UNODC as well as with other international partners to address these. Against this background, I cordially invite you to follow the President's message, and thank you again very much for your attention and for this kind invitation. Over to you, Ronan.
Dear UN member state representatives, dear UNODC Executive Director, Mrs. Waly, dear Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Quickenborne, dear President of the IOC, lieber Thomas, dear Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear allies in combating corruption, ladies and gentlemen, I extend my gratitude to you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of FIFA at this special session on safeguarding sport from corruption within the margins of the UN General Assembly special session on corruption. In February 2020, I published a vision 20 to 2023, which carries the overall objective of making football truly global. This was a statement not only for the organization, but for football as a whole in all parts of the world. We have tasked ourselves to truly globalize football, benefiting players, coaches, stakeholders, teams, clubs, fans, and organizations from around the globe involved in the sport. Our goal is to make football more inclusive, to modernize the sport, especially in areas such as youth and women's competitions. And in the future, to have at least 50 national teams and 50 clubs from all continents competing at the top level, both at men's and women's level, of course. We plan to develop more inclusive formats of our global competitions and the creation of more opportunities for FIFA member associations to successfully bid for and host tournaments. We must have bidding processes that are fully transparent, have clear evaluation criteria, and abide by ethical principles, as well as the allocation of FIFA World Cup and FIFA Women's World Cup hosts voted on by the FIFA Congress. This has already been the case for the FIFA World Cup in 2026 in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and will be the process followed for the first time in the selection of the hosts for the next FIFA Women's World Cup. We must prioritize the delivery of sustainable women's tournaments, promote the importance of and help member associations to foster strong legacy, and increase grassroots and participation programs around the world. Yet, while boosting participation, evolving our competitions and promoting global football activities are key to sustainable football. We must do so with integrity at the heart of these actions. FIFA's core values are found in the organization's pillars of good governance. Based on the comprehensive set of governance reforms introduced in 2016, safeguarding football from corruption, protecting all participants, especially children and vulnerable adults, positively impacting society through the power of football, and of course, integrity. But why are these principles so important? What are the threats to our sport? The new FIFA has learned from its past experiences, which showed how sports organizations can be severely impacted by corruption and rent-seeking behaviors of individuals, unless appropriate checks and balances are fully in place, correctly implemented, and frequently initiated. We must ensure that funding, such as through the FIFA Forward Development Programme and the FIFA COVID-19 Relief Plan, an unprecedented $1.5 billion fund to support our 211 member associations and 6 confederations, cannot be misused. Therefore, we have established a robust financial governance mechanism requiring each member association to provide audited financial statements. In addition, the FIFA Forward Development Funds undergo a separate and detailed review by independent external auditors, and members must agree to contractual obligations. When FIFA established the COVID-19 Relief Plan Steering Committee, it was headed by Mr. Olli Rehn, a member of the Governing Council of the European Central Bank and the former Vice President of the European Commission, in order to oversee the operation of the plan precisely in line with our governance principles. Match manipulation, while relatively uncommon, carries a devastating impact upon the integrity of the game, competitions, and teams. Football is the largest sport by betting volume, holding around a 50% share of the total market and producing a global turnover of over 600 billion euros every year. Out of roughly 36,000 football matches monitored by FIFA every year, an average of 0.4% or around 150 matches are flagged as attracting suspicious betting pattern. Well, for us, that is 150 matches too many. But added to this, the economic consequences of the pandemic have made it easier for criminals to prey on vulnerable individuals involved in football and to incentivize match manipulation. The signing in September 2020 of a Memorandum of Understanding with the UNODC illustrates our commitment to the protection of sports integrity. Our partnership within the past 9 months has demonstrated a great motivation and ambition to work together. FIFA has contributed to the UNODC workshops on safeguarding sport from corruption, sharing knowledge with law enforcement and criminal justice representatives, financial investigation units, anti-corruption authorities and national sports federations. Furthermore, at the occasion of the International Anti-Corruption Day, the UNODC and FIFA joined forces for a new integrity campaign to encourage players, coaches and officials to recognize, resist and report instances of match fixing. The launch of FIFA's Global Integrity Program, developed in partnership with the UNODC, has been a milestone in our commitment to this cause. This program aims to provide integrity officers of all of FIFA's 211 member countries with an in-depth understanding of the phenomenon of match manipulation and measures to tackle it effectively. It kicked off with the first edition dedicated to all member associations affiliated to the Asian Football Confederation in March, and for the South American Football Confederation in April. Editions for the remaining 4 confederations will take place later this year, respectively, in 2022. Apart from awareness raising and capacity building, FIFA is, of course, very active in prosecuting match manipulation cases in the context of its competition. Since 2017, FIFA has successfully concluded 25 investigations into match fixing and sanctioned 24 individuals and 1 club. The international transfer system must also be fit for purpose. The total value of international transfers in 2019 totaled over $7 billion, 5.8% more than in 2018. This means commissions paid to football agents in Greece as well, but set at around 700 million in December 19, 19.3% higher than the full calendar year before. And let's remember that only 70 million are paid for the clubs training players. So a transfer market fueled by speculation and not solidarity means a growing risk of conflicts of interest, huge market inflation, and an increasing competitive imbalance. In response to that, we have created the FIFA Clearinghouse, a central counterpart in charge of performing all required checks in players' transfers and ensuring the money paid by the purchasing clubs is correctly distributed to the training clubs in compliance, of course, with national and international financial regulations. As football is not immune from financial crime, neither is it yet a completely safe space for everyone wishing to take part. Reports of harassment and abuse in sport have been increasing in recent years, often linked to abuse of authority by officials or characterized through sexual abuse, used as the currency of corruption. Therefore, Sports organizations need to have preventive safeguarding measures in place, as well as appropriate measures to respond to concerns or allegations. FIFA launched the FIFA Guardians program, consisting of a toolkit to build capacities of national football associations to help prevent any risk of harm to children and to appropriately respond if concerns arise, as well as the FIFA Guardians Safeguarding in Sport Diploma, a new global education program designed to strengthen and professionalize safeguarding standards across football. Moreover, through our partnership with the UNODC, we are leading discussions to potentially establish an independent, multi-sports, multi-government, and multi-agency international center for safe sports to help manage cases of abuse of children in sport. Taking care of children and protecting young people also relates to fostering youth development and preventing our young people from being absorbed into damaging criminal activities. Another pillar of our collaboration with the UNODC. Football can be a vehicle to help address global challenges, with an emphasis upon education, the development of life skills, and the preservation of the environment, the climate, and the world we live in. Indeed, this approach complements the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Ultimately, of significant importance in our discussions today is, of course, ensuring integrity, protecting football from corruption, crime, and other real dangerous threats to its fabric, beauty, and purity. FIFA and our international allies, including the UNODC, continue to stand united in the fight against corruption, much manipulation, and protecting children all around the world. Meanwhile, we have formalized further collaborations with the World Health Organization, UN Women, UNESCO, the World Food Programme, the Council of Europe, the African Union, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and earlier this week, the Caribbean Community. These partnerships have allowed us, for example, extend the FIFA Integrity e-learning tutorial to all ASEAN member states, and to create the FIFA Women's World Cup Integrity Task Force to monitor suspicious activity potentially impacting upon the tournament. FIFA continues to sit as a contributing stakeholder with the International Partnership Against Corruption in Sport, the Group of States Against Corruption on the Reform of the Transfer System, and the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group. Our global alliances are crucial to our capacity and ability to achieve the goals as laid out in FIFA's vision. I wish to once again express my sincere thanks to you all, for your invaluable contributions into how we achieve a cleaner and safer sport. We all look forward to further enhancing cooperation between sport, organization, and public authorities with a view to our common endeavor to safeguard sport from corruption. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miriam, for joining us today on behalf of Mr. Infantino, and please do also convey our thanks to him for preparing that very enlightening and interesting video about sort of priorities of FIFA. And certainly speaking for myself, the interactions that we've had with colleagues in FIFA over the last few months since signing that MOU late last year have been invaluable and have set an excellent basis to continue the work going forward in this sort of very, very important area, in particular the Global Integrity Programme, but other areas as well, for example, the transfer system and safeguarding youth and vulnerable adults as well from the risks linked to corruption. So Thank you, Miriam, once again, and thank you for taking the time today. With this, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'll now move to close this side event on safeguarding sport from corruption. Before doing so, I'd just like to highlight a couple of practical points to help us think about moving forward. The first will be to say that we will, of course, share the video of today's side event with you after this event. Secondly, my colleagues hopefully will make it available in the chat, but please do have a look at the resources and the tools that have been developed by UNODC to support efforts to tackle corruption and crime in sport. You'll see them here, and I would also underline the availability of us, the team, working with our partners today, like the IOC and FIFA, together also with the FBI and the Ministry of Justice of Belgium, to collaborate, to support, and to help governments and sports organisations both implement their commitments through these resolutions that we mentioned earlier, but also to provide research and analysis about the different types and evolving threats of corruption to sport. And finally, to also provide capacity building with that technical assistance that may be lacking or may need to be enhanced to tackle those problems. And finally, to try and support this collaboration and this cooperation between these communities of sports integrity, officials involved in integrity, but also law enforcement, anti-corruption and criminal justice authorities in general. So with that, what is left for me to do is simply to thank, first and foremost, the presenters today, the panelists, for the time they took to present, to outline their visions and activities to tackle corruption in sport going forward into the future. But of course, also to very much thank the participants today who've taken time out of their busy schedules to join us. Finally, I'd like to thank my colleagues that are on the call today that made today's side event happen, and also to thank colleagues in New York, but also in Vienna, for the organisation of a safe UNGASS, which is due to start any moment now. So going forward, we will keep you up to date about future activities of UNODC, and we count on your support and cooperation as we move forward to tackle corruption and crime in sport. With that, thank you once again, and I wish you all an excellent remainder of your days. All the best. Thank you.